right. Hey, Vikings fans, welcome into another episode of the Skol Hop. I'm Evan.
And I'm Austin.
We're just a couple of dudes from Iowa. We like drinking beer. We
do.
like talking about the Vikings.
We do. We enjoy both of those things.
Yeah, we should skol really quick.
We should. There's a hair on my cup.
Oh, hopefully it's not mine.
Either way, it's beer. Skol.
Skol. What are we drinking today?
Today we've got, I think, our second ever No Coast Brewing Company, No Coast Beer Company beer. Yeah, I think that's No Coast Beer Company. Yep. I wasted way too much time on that. Let's talk about what actually matters. It is No Coast's Make Waves Amber Ale.
Yeah.
And, Amber Ale, 5.2%.
And it's very amber.
Yeah, it's got a heavy amber flavor in the best way possible. You noticed a few things about it.
Yeah, the ingredients on the can were kind of listed out in their description here. Brewed with British ale yeast, roasted barley, and special bee malt, which I don't know what any of those things mean, but they just sound good. And they come together to make a really tasty, delicious beer.
Yeah, so I like it a lot. And ambers, they're not my number one, but I mean, shoot, they're getting close to favorable types of beer for me. Obviously the hazy IPAs, those are my jam, but these amber beers, maybe it's the time of year too. But
and you were in charge of bringing the beer today, and this is what you chose. So I think much like when we were 10 years old and I influenced you to become a Vikings fan, I might be influencing you to kind of adopt some new tastes in beer.
Yeah, you know what, maybe amber beers won't consistently hurt me as much as the Vikings have. So,
well, we're going to focus on the positives today. We've got a little bit of a special episode. We're kind of breaking away from our normal kind of week to week where we recap the previous game and look ahead to the next game. And we wanted to take some time and consider kind of our top 10 Vikings players of all time.
Yeah, it's a good topic. One that any team you could do this for any team, any position group. We just went Vikings and overall players. And this could be anybody. I think we kind of set some ground rules.
Yep. You and I were texting back and forth, and you'd mentioned, like, hey, let's avoid like Brett Favre's, guys that have only been around for a season or two, focusing in more on guys that spent most of their careers with the Vikings.
Yeah, guys that the NFL doesn't do it like when you get in the Hall of Fame, you don't go in as a member of a certain team, you just go in as a player and you represent all the teams you do. But I think baseball is the one that when you go in the Hall, like your cap is the team that you select of any of the teams that you played for. So technically, like Brett Favre, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback and maybe one of the best quarterbacks to ever play for the Vikings. But him specifically, we kind of left off the list because he's obviously an all-time Packer. And he played 2 seasons, one really good, one forgettable one with the Vikings. And so, that was a lot of fun. But as far as top 10 of all time, I don't know if he qualifies for Vikings.
Yeah. And you also... we kind of took different approaches, I guess we could say, when we compiled our list. And also, I think we can talk about that in a minute, but it's important to note for the listener, the viewer out there, that we also haven't revealed our lists to each other. So when we reveal our picks to our listeners, we're also revealing them to each other for the first time.
Yeah. So how do we want to play this, though, in a little on-air production meeting? If we both, like, if you say a player and that player is also on my list or vice versa, do we want to reveal that right away? Like if I say, John Smith and you're like, oh yeah, actually he's on my list. Like you ranked them, right? You have a 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
I just have a group. Anyone on my list is just on the list. I don't have number 1, number 2, number 3.
Well, how about this? How about I lead off?
Okay.
And I will go in order 10 to 1. I also have 2 honorable mentions.
Okay.
So we'll go 10 to 1. Before we get to my first pick, I can list off my honorable mentions.
Okay.
And then you can reveal your picks as you see fit. If there is a match and you want to talk about that, you can. or if you want to go in a different direction, you could too.
I think that makes sense because we'll kind of go in order for your list, and it just exists. Mine is just if you let the 10 guys into a room, there is no order. It's just they're in the room. Yours is, hey, who's in there first? Like,
and I'll be honest too. My list is ranked very subjectively from my perspective. We were even talking before we started rolling that it's kind of difficult to account for some of the historical Vikings players that we never had the opportunity to watch play.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been some phenomenal players that have played for this organization, and we just weren't alive to see them.
Yeah, we were born in the early 90s.
Yes.
And you could argue the greatest Viking years were in like the 70s, you know?
Yep.
So we didn't even get to see feel live the highlights of being a Vikings fan back then.
We don't know what it's like to have a Vikings team in the Super Bowl. And
we've come close. But
it might be a while before we get there.
cigar.
Hopefully soon, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Oh, well. Yeah, we are pre-recording this, and technically the 23-24 season is still happening. It would be awesome to have to display like a banner above, like, as you're saying that, like, we didn't know. The Vikings are not, at the end of the 23-24 season, will not be Super Bowl champions again, overwhelmingly likely. But it would be really fun to have to, like, disclaimer that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Unlikely.
Do we want to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So
right.
you go first. You're number 10. I also have a few honorable mentions. 3 technically, but
Okay. We'll save those right before our first picks or our final picks.
Okay.
So, number 10 on my list. Let's see if you can guess the player.
Oh man. Am I just cold trying to guess?
I'll give you stats. This should be pretty obvious,
All right.
but current player,
Okay.
2020 to the present, 380 receptions, 5,007 yards, 29 touchdowns, 257 first downs, 3-time Pro Bowl, probably 4 if I had to guess. All Pro in 22. He was the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2020 and Offensive Player of the Year in 22.
Well, I was going to make a joke about the other first round pick the Vikings had in 2020, but then I realized his current situation and thought that might be a little tacky. So obviously he is not on my list.
Really?
But that is the great JJ.
That is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
You are correct.
So
Nice job.
yeah, he's not on my list. Just when it's all said and done, he would probably be in my top 10, but right now it's just,
It's not
was
said
too
and done
fresh,
at this
yeah.
point.
although
I get that.
He is a player that if right now, like somebody came up and chopped both his legs off and he would never, ever play another snap of football ever again, he would still be one of the greatest Vikings of all time after almost 3 full seasons.
3 full seasons. This is his 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he sat out, I don't know how many games this season. 7.
He was out 7 or something. Like that hamstring injury really put a hamper on his season.
And the timing of it with the bye week approaching, and they were playing well without him. I think that had an effect too. But anyways, I think he's on the list. Again, subjectively, my opinion, he's not a top 5 yet. He might get there, and I think if he continues to play at the rate that he has his first 4 seasons, and he can avoid injury, and he's got a good quarterback throwing him balls, then I think he easily cracks anybody's top 5. He's just been lights out, arguably the best offensive player in the league pretty much since he started in 2020.
Yeah, and he's one of the few guys that when his career is all said and done, he is, one of the few non-quarterbacks that you could argue any given year could be an MVP candidate.
And he was an MVP candidate. I think he finished 5th in 22 in the MVP voting.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
And he was on a tear to start off the 23 season. It's just he got that unfortunate injury. And then other things happened. Kirk went down, which hindered his performance and ability a little bit too. But like when it's all said and done, if he plays 15 years, it wouldn't be a shock if he got the MVP during one of the seasons of his career. So yeah, I'm not arguing just because he's not on my list. I'm not saying he's not worthy. Good pick.
Thanks. Who do you got?
All right. So, man, I don't know which order to go in. I'll go from the last guy I had listed, which is also, again, not in any order of being the last guy. I had another current player. Maybe you can guess.
Okay.
I'm trying to think.
We might have the same one.
Yeah? Okay.
And he might be my next one, too.
Ooh, yeah.
This could be interesting. All right, go ahead.
Well, he was a first rounder. I won't say the year. He's got 4 total touchdowns. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, though it should be more. It absolutely should be more. And here's where it starts to focus in a little bit. He's got 19 and a half sacks. He has over 1,000 total tackles, 34 interceptions, 84 pass deflections, 12 forced fumbles, 8 fumble recoveries. Any guesses yet?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to keep going?
Well, do you have a guess?
I know who. I mean, because we have identical stats listed. This is Harrison Smith.
This is Harrison Smith.
And he's my number 9.
Nice. Okay.
So, yeah.
Harry the Hitman, as
Harry
PA would say. This guy, we could have a whole podcast episode or series of podcasts on this guy. Seems like a fantastic dude. Like, we never heard of him being in trouble. We've never heard anything bad about him off the field. He's rarely injured. He's always on the field, always making a play. Rarely do we complain about like, oh, dang, Harry really missed that. Sure. Has he missed a play or two here and there? Yes, everybody has. He's been in the league for 10 seasons at this point.
And he definitely takes advantage of the veteran, like, kind of time off.
Oh, yeah.
During the week, you know. I don't even know what they call it or how it works.
Like rest days and stuff. But during the week, yeah.
He'll take advantage of those, and I don't blame him. I mean, he's out there grinding. I think he's probably played more snaps since he was drafted than any other Viking.
Maybe,
if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think he's the longest tenured Viking at this moment, like active tenured Viking.
2012 was his first season. I don't think we said that.
Yep, he was drafted in 2012, 29th overall, and I'm pretty sure the Vikings traded for that pick. I don't remember.
He's a Notre Dame guy too, right?
Yeah, Notre Dame guy. Just fantastic. And one thing that kind of surprised me, he had I think it was a Brian Robison 96 questions or something, some kind of a video like that in this 23-24 season, during the season, where I think it was the 96 questions. Robison was going around interviewing players and asking different players different questions. And he asked Harrison Smith, like, who other than you would be the vocal guy? Who would be the leader on the defense? And Harrison Smith, he gave an answer that kind of surprised me. It was something to the tune of like, well, I'm kind of a quiet guy in the meeting rooms and the locker rooms and stuff. I'm kind of quiet, but he hyped up Josh Metellus as that vocal, in the moment leader, the guy you follow. And I think Harrison Smith, while he may not be super vocal and rah-rah and, you know, leading the huddle and stuff, he's definitely the one where you watch him. He leads by example. If Harry can do it, I can do it. I think earlier in this season, he led up on getting an easy pick because he saw Byron Murphy. Yep. And he was saying like, you, and Byron Murphy picked it off. And he's just a leader and a good guy. I think he wants to be a Viking his whole career. I'd love that. He will be one of the quote unquote 50 greatest Vikings if they ever do that list ever again.
Yep, I definitely agree. And like I said, we had almost identical stats listed for him. I mean, he just emblemizes, I think, what it means to be a Viking. He is a Viking through and through. I would have to guess before the late, great Bug Grant passed away that he looked at Harrison Smith and thought he's a rare player in today's league. He would have fit in back in those 60s and 70s era Vikings teams that were just tough, gritty, nose to the grindstone. They're going to go out and just play even if there's blood on their jersey, even if they've got a broken finger or whatever. I would have to guess. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I would have to guess that was maybe something that was thought about. And like I said, he just truly emblemizes, that's the best word that I can find, what it means to be a Vikings player. So Yeah.
I think we joke about how TJ Hawkinson, he looks like the logo. We call him logo. It's not, I mean, other people do too. It's not unique to us. But while Harry the Hitman, he doesn't look like the logo, he probably, to his core, is the logo. You know what I mean? Like, he is the Viking.
Yep.
And one final note from me on Harrison Smith is when he got drafted in his first couple of leagues in the year, since then, we've seen a shift in the NFL that favors the offense and really penalizes the hard, gruesome hits from the defenders, really favors offensive wide receivers and quarterbacks, especially being protected from those hits where the defenders get penalized all the time. For the most part, he has very successfully, he was elite in the old era where you could just knock a guy's head off and almost never get penalized. And I'd argue he's elite in this new era where, I mean, you got to be more safety focused and not try to murder people on the field. And he's kind of evolved his game to be able to work in both kinds of play styles. And maybe him getting older favors that the newer style of not having to rip everybody's head off too. I don't know. He's great. I love him. I want him to be a Viking forever.
Agreed. Well, I've already revealed 2 of my picks, so you've got to reveal another one.
All right. Well, that was just, frankly, I have 3 pieces of paper in front of me, and he was the only one on the third paper. So that was, Harrison was the only one on the third paper.
So it was kind of,
so I got rid of 1 piece of paper.
It's functional at that point.
So I will go, where else am I going to go here? I'm just going to do it. And we'll have you guess again.
Okay.
All right?
I
like this guessing thing. All right. This young man was a first round pick for the Vikings. Trying to think of some of these stats that won't immediately give it up. 7-time Pro Bowler. He has 305 receptions for 2,474 yards. Oh, also a caveat. When I was gathering stats, a lot of these guys played most of their careers with the Vikings, but they may have had some one-off years. I couldn't figure out an easy way to gather stats that focused on their Viking years. So any stat I say is going to be for their whole career. Even if they're with other teams. So yeah, 2,474 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, the 2012 NFL MVP, 14,918 rushing yards, and 120 rushing touchdowns. Any clue who this might be?
It's not a player that's on my list. I can tell you that.
Okay.
Is it Percy Harvin?
It is not Percy Harvin.
Really?
The 2012 NFL MVP, the most recent Viking NFL MVP.
You gave receiving stats, though.
Then I gave rushing stats.
Okay, Adrian Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, he is on my list.
Okay.
You threw me off with the receiving stats.
I was trying to give away stats that didn't immediately do it.
That's fair. I had receiver in my head, which is why I guessed Percy Harvin.
Yeah.
So he might not have even been on the team in 2012.
I think he was a rookie in 22. No, he was a rookie in 09 because that was Favre's first year as a Viking.
Okay. Anyways.
He may not have been a Viking by the time 2012 came around, honestly. Anyways, this is Adrian Peterson. He's on my list, and we could talk for hours on should he be on any list because of off-the-field stuff. Ultimately, on the field, he is one of the best Vikings of all time. Definitely the best running back. We have a jersey of arguably the second best Vikings running back in Robert Smith hanging right between us. I say arguably because I think Dalvin pushed his way into that conversation too. But yeah, Adrian, MVP. Like that for me, that's all you need to say. MVP. Every Vikings MVP should be on this list, and that may be a spoiler for the rest of my list a little bit. But yeah, he was one of my first favorite players. I think we were in high school when he was drafted.
07.
Yeah. Just an elite player. And at the running back position, he was elite for longer than most elite running backs are good.
He was very durable, for sure. And I don't think you gave his rushing stats. He's on my list. We'll get to that in a second. Mm-hmm. But he had 2,418 carries. Mm-hmm. And this is the stats I was looking at. These are just his Viking stats.
Okay.
2,418 carries for 11,747 yards, 97 touchdowns.
Yeah. So he had over 100 touchdowns as a Viking. It's just between rushing and receiving.
And he also was the league leading rusher 3 times, 08, his MVP season 2012 and 2015. And he led the league in yards per game 4 times, 07, 08, 2012 and 2015.
Yeah. Just durable, elite. The most games he missed were for off the field reasons. He tore his ACL and missed 1 game. Now, granted, yeah, that's a little deceiving because there's a whole off season between that. But yeah, just durable, a physical freak, put up numbers. And you said, what did he lead it in 08, 2012, and 2015? Think about the stretch of time. There are whole running back high and low careers that happened between 2012 and 2015, and he spanned it being very good for almost a decade for the Vikings.
He's definitely one of the greatest Vikings of all time, hands down.
Yeah, and to be a non-quarterback to win the MVP, that's no small feat.
Do you want to take a guess as to where I have AP in my list?
Ooh, I think he's top 5.
He is top 5.
I think you've got him number 3. No way.
Yeah.
Really? This is not planned. I have no idea.
Yep. Number 3.
Nice. Yeah.
So,
fair spot for him.
we can jump over that when we get there.
Yeah,
I mean,
we'll give him
another thumbs up when we get around to it. But yeah, he's one of the greats for sure. Off field stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
aside,
we don't want to even touch the off field stuff just because there's opinions, and regardless, that's not good stuff. But on the field, one of the greatest Vikings ever.
All right, we'll move on to my 8th pick.
Okay.
So JJ was 10, Harrison Smith was 9 for me. So number 8, and actually the next 3 of mine are all prior to our lives.
Okay.
Vikings.
Pre-90.
Pre-90 Vikings, yep. And honestly, the 80s and the early 90s were pretty bad for the Vikings.
Yeah, those were some dark times.
I don't have anybody on my list from those years of Vikings football.
I don't believe I do either.
But this guy, I believe, still holds, let's see if you can guess this one. He still holds the career interception record.
I know exactly who it is.
Yep. He was a free safety from 1968 to 1979. 81 career interceptions, 53 with the Vikings. 11 fumble recoveries, 2 touchdowns, 8-time Pro Bowl, 6 with the Vikings, 3-time All-Pro, 1 with the Vikings. And this would be...
Oh, this would be Paul Krause.
Paul Krause.
Number 22, the original number 22.
Yep.
And if the Vikings ever retire numbers again, which they haven't done for a while, even though there's been a couple of worthy guys. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the last retired number would have been Corey Stringer.
77.
And maybe Chris Carter, depending on the timing of when they did that.
I can look really quick.
Yeah, and that's not a huge thing. But when they retire the number 22, which they should, and it should be a dual retirement for Harrison Smith and Paul Krause. They're both worthy of it. I think they would both welcome that idea of being dual honored for that number. They definitely should do it. And yeah, Paul Krause, Hawkeye. You may not know that.
I didn't know that.
He's a Hawkeye. He was drafted to the Washington, at the time, the Washington Redskins. And they traded for him after 4 years there. He had 28 interceptions in 4 years, and they traded him. Can you imagine in today's NFL if somebody, unless he's like a horrible person, like just the worst person to ever deal with, always getting in trouble, like that's the only time somebody nowadays would get traded like that. And to my knowledge, Paul Krause was not a horrible person.
Yeah, I don't think so.
He's still with us. Yeah, just seems like a good dude. I think he still hosts like away game watch parties at his house. Like anybody can just
We should do that.
Yeah, I think he charges like $25 to go and watch games in his garage, and like
That's
makes
cool.
it a big deal. Like, if we don't do that, and we never get a chance to before he passes, because he's getting up there too, I'm gonna be. That's a missed opportunity.
Right, we're gonna put that on our to-do list, and we're gonna look into that.
Maybe
that sounds,
the 2024 season.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, hopefully we don't need another edit. Like, rest in peace.
Yeah,
he is still with
hopefully
us.
not. Hopefully not.
But yeah, I have any other?
Is he on your list?
He is on my list. Pro Football Hall of Famer. I listed, if they're a Hall of Famer, I listed the year they got in. Kraus went in 1998. Heck of a year for the Vikings.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, still holds the career interceptions number, which you got to think with the way the game is changing, at some point that would get broken, but I don't know who's number 2. Like, I don't know the highest. Isn't it the active players, at least at the end of the 22-23 season, it ended with Harrison Smith and Patrick Peterson among all active players, and they had something like 35 or 36.
I think you're right, because they were both Vikings at the end of the season last year.
That was still the highest. They both were tied or right next to each other in the active. So if those guys are at less than half of Kraus's numbers, maybe that's one of those records
Unbreakable.
that won't be beat. You got to think it will, though.
He didn't have a super long career either. He played from 68 to 79, or at least for the Vikings.
He played from 64 to 79.
Okay, so he played those 4 years
with the Redskins
for Washington first. Okay, so 14 years though, or 15 years.
Yeah, and what's Harry at? 10, and he feels like Harry's coming up to his limelight of his career too. So
yeah,
I mean, 14 years. That's quite a few seasons, maybe 15 seasons. I don't know.
Yep.
More than half of those, he was a Pro Bowler with 8. Yeah, the Vikings traded a linebacker and a 7th-round pick to get him. And I'd never heard of the linebacker, Marlon McKeever. Sorry if you're listening. But yeah, that guy right now, he'd get multiple first-round picks for a guy coming off 28 interceptions. Like, yeah, such a great Viking.
Yeah, definitely. And number 8 on my list.
Yeah.
And again, these next few are from the older generation, and they're not low on my list because I think less of them. They're lower on my list because I didn't get to watch them play.
Yeah.
I've only ever heard stories or seen like recaps or looked at stats and things like that. So we mentioned the retired numbers. We got number 10, Fran Tarkenton.
The great Fran Tarkenton.
You have Mick Tingelhoff, 53. I think, wasn't he the first ever draft pick for the Vikings?
No, he
came
in 1962. We may hear about more about Mick later on in the episode.
Interesting. Jim Marshall, number 70. Corey Stringer, 77.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Carter, 80, which would have probably been the last number to be retired by the Vikings. I think
he was, yeah.
And then 88, Alan Page.
Yeah. So keep those names in mind there, Ev.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've got one. You ready for my number 7?
Yeah, you're up next because I revealed one of mine with Paul Kraus.
So my number 7 was, I believe, the first quarterback for the Vikings.
Wow.
We just mentioned his number has now been retired.
Yep.
He was the quarterback from 61 to 66, and then played for the Giants for a handful of years, and then came back and played again for the Vikings from 72 to 78. He has 2,635 completions on 4,569 attempts for a 57.7 completion percentage, 33,098 yards, 239 touchdowns, a 9-time Pro Bowler, 5 with the Vikings, and he was All-Pro in 1975.
And Fran Tarkenton was inducted into the Hall of Fame, I think it says, 1986.
And I didn't take that into consideration when I was creating my list, so thanks for adding that.
Yeah. So, he did not start the first game for the Vikings. It's kind of famous Vikings lore that he came off the bench, and I think I'm going to get the numbers wrong. He threw for 3 touchdowns and ran for 1 more, or he threw for 4 touchdowns and ran for 1 more in that first game. It's either 3 or 4 passing touchdowns. Electric. I don't remember. He was drafted, 29th overall, which in 1961, if you were the 29th overall pick, you were drafted in the 3rd round.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A little bit different times. So he was not a first round pick. But yeah, probably the first best Viking. He is on my list. If I hadn't said that already, he changed the game. There were no mobile quarterbacks before he started running around. Like, he changed the idea of a quarterback running around, extending the play, gaining time, and he was slippery.
He was Michael Vick before Michael Vick.
Yeah. When he retired, he had the most passing touchdowns of all time, with 342. I think also in Favre-like fashion, he retired with the most interceptions of all time with 266. And those numbers are for his whole career between the Vikings and the Giants.
Yep.
I think there was only one of the 4 Vikings Super Bowls that he did not start in because at the time he was a Giant. Just elite player. Probably the first best Viking.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And still is very much involved with the organization, I think.
Seems to be. I think there were some dark ages for him for whatever reason. I don't know if he just wasn't invited to a lot of stuff or if he just kind of wanted that to be put in the past, or I don't know, but maybe there's some bad blood somewhere between the organization and him. That's a complete guess, but the last handful of years he seems to have been more involved with the team, more around the team.
Yeah.
Which is nice. You want that to happen.
Yep.
Because he too is getting up there, and someday we will say, like, he's not with us anymore. So it's nice to still have him around.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
Number 6.
Yeah. We'll keep with you because we've been in step for the last couple.
So I went a little bit off script for number 6.
Okay.
And instead of picking one, I picked a handful.
Oh, okay.
I think
I know who you're picking.
Yeah, this will make sense. And it was tough because this group of individuals changed a little bit over its history. So I went with the core of the group that was in existence for the longest stretch of time. So there's only 3 of them, although historically there were 4, but that 4th player was always kind of interchangeable.
Yeah. He's like the drummer of the band, and you just never know which one it's going to be this time. So.
Right. So this would be my number 6, the Purple People Eaters.
Good pick.
And I lumped them all together, not because they don't deserve to be individually recognized, but I also wanted to save some room on the list for some other players.
Yeah, you cheated on your list. That's okay.
There were no rules.
I respect this. I respect this a lot.
We got to make the rules because it's our list, and we get to do what we want with it. So, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, 2 of which have retired numbers that we just mentioned. Page and Marshall have their numbers retired. But just some quick hitting stats. This is the most interesting. Alan Page, 108.5 sacks. Carl Eller, 130.5 sacks. Jim Marshall, 128 sacks. Cumulatively, like nearly 300 sacks.
Over 300.
I can't do math.
Yeah, they all had more than 100, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, this surprised me a little bit when I looked it up, but Alan Page and Carl Eller are a little more decorated in terms of Pro Bowls, All Pro. I thought Jim Marshall would have been a little bit more decorated that way, so to speak.
Yeah.
But Alan Page, 9-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All Pro, and he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, his rookie year in '67, and he was League MVP in 1971.
Yeah, one of 2 defensive players to ever get the NFL MVP award, the other being Lawrence Taylor for the Giants.
Yep. Carl Eller, 6-time Pro Bowl, 5-time All Pro. He was Rookie of the Year in 1964. And Defensive Player of the Year in '71. That '71 defense was tough.
So, and both Page and Eller got a Defensive Player of the Year award in '71. It's just, I think one was from the AP, the other one was from like another media source. I forget, NEA or something like that. So depending on what you look at as the award, only one of them has it, but they were both honored that year.
Yep. And then Jim Marshall was a 2-time Pro Bowler. I was surprised that he didn't have any other accolades to add to his list. I don't know. Maybe you dug up some other stuff on him. I don't know if he's on your list at all.
Well, I think, yeah, so all three of them are on my list as individuals.
Really?
Yeah, so
Nice.
obviously it's not a bad selection. So Jim Marshall, he was started off as a Brown, Cleveland Brown. He was traded to the Vikings for 2 picks. I couldn't find which selections they were. I think Marshall is also, I might be wrong, I think he also played for the Canadian Football League for a year.
That sounds right.
He started 270 consecutive games, which is number 2 right now to only Brett Favre, which is interesting because both of them were Vikings when they set their records. 2-time Pro Bowler. I say he's tragically not in the Hall of Fame. He keeps kind of getting close. He's every handful of years he's one of the finalists, but never gets to be in like the last list of selections in the Hall of Fame. One day he'll get in. I think the team has been trying to make a push for him to get in. Every handful of years they
I
do
saw
some media
something
blitz.
just the other day.
Yeah.
It was like, get Jim Marshall in.
Yeah.
I agree for sure.
Jim Marshall is the namesake for Marshall on How I Met Your Mother. So if you
I
ever
didn't
see,
realize that.
if you watch that show and you ever see Marshall in a Vikings jersey, because he's a Vikings fan
He's
from
wearing
Minnesota.
88.
He's wearing Jim Marshall's number 70, which is retired. Alan Page was 88.
Alan Page was 88. That's my bad.
So yeah, Jim Marshall should be in the Hall of Fame. He played 270 consecutive games alone. Yeah, he doesn't have the Pro Bowls. He's not an MVP, but he should be in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. Alan Page, Minnesota Supreme Court Justice.
Yeah, that's right.
He did that for 13 years. He only stopped because they have an age limit at 70 years old, so he had to retire at that limit. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2018. Another retired number. He is a Hall of Famer. He went in 1988, which is crazy. He went in 2 to 3 years before either of us were born.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Just being an NFL MVP. Like, sure, that award probably didn't mean as much as it does today when he earned it in 1971, but he's still not a quarterback, not an offensive player at all, and he earned the MVP award. Like, that's crazy. That's awesome. And then who was the other one? Carl Eller. Yeah, drafted in the first round in 1964, 133 and a half sacks. Those stats can be a little weird because sacks didn't become an official stat until well after all of their careers. 6-time Pro Bowler, and Carl Eller got in the Hall of Fame in 2004. Just the Purple People Eaters are, I'm not mad at your pick. They are one of the greatest Vikings of all time as a group and individually too. So
yeah, I did cheat maybe a little bit, or at least bent the rules a little bit.
No, I think you're good.
But yeah, there were other players that I wanted to talk about again because it's my list, and I got to pick who I wanted to pick.
You get to.
Yeah. So have you listed off 5 already? I mean, if we include the Purple People Eaters as 3.
1, 2, 3, 4. Where am I at? 5, 6, 7.
Oh, I got some catching up to do then.
Yeah.
All right.
So go for it.
Okay. Well, we'll jump to my number 5. Let's see if you can guess this one. He's been referenced already in this conversation, but let's see if there are any. Well, there's not a lot that I can say that won't give it away, but I'll try to throw you off.
Did he play for the Patriots?
No.
Oh, okay.
He spent his whole career as a Viking.
Okay.
7 seasons. He has 6 receiving touchdowns, 32 touchdowns. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler in 98 and 2000. He played from 93 to 2000. If I give anything else away, you'll guess it right away.
You gave reception yards and touchdowns, or maybe not yards, but you gave some receiving totals. But have we talked about his jersey?
We have.
today.
Yeah.
Are we sitting in the presence of his signature right now?
We sure are.
You're talking about Robert Smith.
Yeah.
Maybe arguably the
Second
second best running back in Vikings history.
Yes. Which is why I have him at 5.
Yeah.
And Adrian Peterson at 3.
3, yeah.
So yeah, Robert Smith, running back from 93 to 2000, 6,818 rushing yards, which is a little more than half of what Adrian Peterson had.
As a Viking.
A Viking. But I think, the Vikings haven't had another running back like him that's been as productive as him since, I think yours is over there.
Yeah, I moved it.
There it is. And also, I think he was just consistent. I don't know his injury history, but I grew up watching him.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I have this signature is because a distant family member of mine lived down the street from him and literally just walked down the street, knocked on his door, and he signed the jersey. And this was my Christmas present when I was like 12 years old or something like that.
What a great Christmas present.
It was awesome. And I've only ever appreciated it more and more the older I've gotten. But I think we're both right to say he is the second best. There have been some good running backs. Dalvin Cook was up there and could potentially find his way into that conversation at the end of his career.
Yeah, I think longevity keeps Dalvin out of the conversation.
But yeah, I think Robert Smith is that number 2 guy. And he walked away, I think, at the height of his career, and he had many more good years in him. And I think he took the high road and said, selfishly, I could keep playing, but I don't need to.
Yeah.
And he walked away without any sort of fanfare or controversy or anything like that. It was just, nope, this is my time. I'm done. And I respect that a lot. I think there's a lot to be said about just his character and who he is.
I'm sure the information's out there, but I wish I knew more about his decision making in that retiring process. I don't think it was like, oh, he blew his knee out and that was it. I think, like you said, it was on his terms and he chose to end his career. I don't know of any bad blood or any he definitely could have had opportunities, even if for some reason the Vikings weren't opening the door for him, which I can't imagine they wouldn't have. If you think he played in the same time as Barry Sanders, and if not for Barry Sanders, we'd be talking a lot. The NFL world would be talking a lot more about Robert Smith as a running back. Mm-hmm. It's just, that's Barry Sanders. That it was in his same division. Another guy that walked away on his terms, Barry Sanders retired a little bit early as well. But yeah, so you think of being one of the greatest and only playing 7 years. That's a short career. But I can't argue with that. He's not on my list. But maybe he would have been if I would have grouped a bunch of people together.
Is that now you're just throwing darts. Is that the only player that we've had so far that is on my list that isn't on yours?
I don't remember.
I think so.
Maybe.
I think so. Well, no, JJ was the other one.
JJ, yep. JJ and Robert Smith.
Got it. Well, there you go. Robert Smith, I think he's just in my lifetime and by virtue of the fact that I have a signed jersey of his, he's in my top 5.
Yeah.
He is number 5.
And it's kind of funny too that, he's a successful announcer of college football on TV. He's been on, analyst shows for mostly college football. It's kind of funny that there are probably a lot of people out there that know of him and like when he talks that have no clue that he was actually a very successful, one of the best Vikings running backs of all time.
And played on arguably one of the best Vikings teams.
Was he a 98?
Yeah.
Oh,
93
man.
to 2000. He was on that 98 squad. And he was a Pro Bowler that year in 98.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, an interesting fact, aside from AP, all of my other top 5 players were on the team in 98.
Oh, yeah?
Nope, I take that back. 3 of my top 5 were on the roster in 98.
Okay.
3 of my top 5.
Now I'm going to be thinking about, is Jared Allen on your list or not? I don't know. But we don't have to spoil that yet. But yeah, I think you still need to catch up to me as far as revealing players because I've got the purple people eaters separated. So
you've made 7,
7 of mine are revealed,
and I've made 6. So my number 4 on my list would be, he was drafted in 99. We'll just keep going with the guessing thing here. Drafted in 99. I don't think he started until 2000. He may have played 1 game in 99.
Okay.
But I think he took over as a starter in 2000. He has 149 touchdowns, offensive player. 3-time Pro Bowler in 2000, 03, and 04. I'm not going to give away anything else for fear of spoiling it.
Do you have his signed jersey as well?
I do. Yes, I do. I almost said no, but then I was like, wait a minute. Yes, I do.
This is Dante Culpepper.
This is
the
Dante
best
Culpepper.
version of Dante Culpepper.
Yep. The best version.
Yeah, because after his Vikings career, he really didn't.
He kind of tanked.
Yeah, which I don't know why. For somebody to be so elite, was he officially like co-MVP one year, or was it just a really tight?
I don't have that on my list. It didn't stand out to me on the sources I was looking at.
There's something there. Maybe that was a year that he could have. I don't remember. Anyways, he was electric, and all he had to do was throw bombs to Randy Moss all the time, and it worked.
Yep. 63% completion rate. He has 2,016 completions on 3,199 attempts, 24,153 yards.
Man, what could have been?
And 149 touchdowns, 3-time Pro Bowler.
And all of it came crashing down, I think, when the Vikings were playing the Bengals, and he tore his ACL. And that was right before ACLs stopped being career-altering injuries.
Yep.
Now, it's never good to tear your ACL, but it's almost like a 6, 7, 8, 9-month recovery, and then for the most part, you're back. Back then, even in the early 2000s, 2004, I think is when it happened for him.
Yep.
It was, pretty much the stamp on your career. You were basically done. Which he did come back and play. The Vikings traded him away to the Dolphins, I think, for a 2nd-round pick. And that's when the Dolphins were deciding between Dante or Drew Brees, and famously made the wrong decision. They should have signed Drew Brees. But Brees even then was coming off a shoulder injury, and it was iffy if he was going to be the same guy after being a Charger for a while. This is a Drew Brees podcast now.
No, it's not. Although I respect the guy.
Yeah. But yeah, back to Dante. He played for the Dolphins and then the Raiders, and then he bounced around a little bit. He was a Sacramento Lion for a minute in like whatever UFL or whatever league that was. He played on the 0-16 Lions for a minute. I think famously he got signed on like a Thursday and then started that Sunday or something. I don't know. He bounced around. If he never tore that ACL, who knows what could have happened. That was also Brad Childress came in and traded him away before Childress ever coached a game. Yeah, good pick. Oh, everything I just said was terrible things about him, but
it wasn't.
When he was a Viking, man, that was so much fun.
And that's why I think he's in my top 5. And like for me, his active years as a Viking were some of the best years to watch. I mean, I turned 10 in 2000. And I turned 15 in 05 when his Vikings career ended.
Formative years.
So yeah, from ages 10 to 15, Dante Culpepper was our quarterback, and it was fun to watch Vikings football.
Yeah, I think you indoctrinated me into the Vikings fanhood in like 01.
Yep.
And my favorite players, I could name all 3 of them. Dante, Randy, and Chris Hovan. Those were my guys. Those were my favorite players. I remember going to my first Vikings game in like, I don't know, 02, 03, 04. They were playing the Bears, and I remember we were in the nosebleeds. I had binoculars, and I saw Chris Hovan run on the field. I was like, oh, that's Chris Hovan. Like, oh my gosh. But like, I think Randy caught a touchdown that game. It was so fun. Those were our formative years as Vikings fans.
Absolutely.
And Dante was the Pro Bowl quarterback. He was Cam Newton before Cam Newton came in. Just a big dude.
And he was a different quarterback. He was bigger, but he was mobile. He was fast. He could move. He had pocket presence, but he also could get out of things and run it himself. I mean, he was a fun player to watch. He could be electric at times.
And I think one of the first $100 million contracts to be signed. I think at one point, a year or two before he got traded away, he signed something like a 10-year, $100 million contract. And that was such a crazy thing at that point.
I'm guessing he's not on your list.
He is not on my list, but he was my first favorite quarterback as a Vikings fan.
That's fair. Well, my number 3 pick has already been revealed, and we've spent quite a bit of time talking about Adrian Peterson, AP or AD, depending on...
Yeah. So is it my turn now?
So, yeah, it is your turn, and then I've got one pick before we get to our honorable mentions.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked Fran Tarkenton, we've talked Jim Marshall, and Adrian. We're going to throw it way back to a relatively recent Hall of Famer. This guy was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. He started 240 consecutive games, which at the time he retired was the second longest streak. And even now, it's like the third or fourth longest streak. And there are Vikings at the top of that list of longest streaks. 6-time Pro Bowler. He was undrafted, Evan. Something I didn't know until today. He is, hands down, the greatest undrafted Viking of all time, without question. And that's even...
Has he been mentioned already? Have we talked about him?
I believe his name has been said today.
In the retired numbers section?
In the retired numbers section.
Okay.
So who do you think it is?
Mick Tingelhoff.
Mick Tingelhoff. The late, great Mick Tingelhoff. I think he passed away in the last couple of years. 2021, I believe. But yeah, I did not know until today that he was undrafted, which is very crazy. Like 12 hours ago, if you would ask me who the best undrafted Viking of all time was, I mean, I think it'd be pretty hard not to say Adam Thielen. Maybe there's some other guys on that list, but yeah, there's no question now. Mick Tingelhoff, he was undrafted, played for the Vikings, and I believe no one else from 1962 until 1978. Wow. So we've mentioned some names that were in that group for almost 20 years. I mean, the whole Purple People Eaters for the most part, early to mid 60s to the late 70s. Mick Tingelhoff, Fran Tarkenton, he had those Giants years, but for the most part, he was in that core group of elite Vikings
Paul Krause
for the better part of 15 to 20 years, which is crazy. And coincidentally, they're all on our lists.
And unfortunately, we never had a chance to watch any of them play.
Yeah, and you could argue like that they wouldn't do anything in this era of football, but during their era, they were elite. Like the Vikings were a perennial contender every year. It's just they never punched their ticket.
Well, that's, you talk about eras. I mean, that's the whole debate with Jordan and LeBron, to take it out of football for a minute. Like, well, LeBron is just playing in a different NBA than Michael Jordan played. And people go back and forth on that all the time. But I agree with you. I definitely think those guys were some of the greatest players in the league in their time. And that's why most of them are on this list.
And in the Hall of Fame. I think of those guys, there's only one not in the Hall of Fame, Jim Marshall, who should be. Yeah. I think it's just the Pro Bowl numbers for Jim Marshall. Like if he had even 4 Pro Bowls, he'd be in the Hall. But we're not talking about him right now. The Vikings don't retire numbers anymore. I wonder if they were to erase everything right now and figure out numbers to retire, if he would be retired still at 53. But I think he should be. And that seems like a good honor.
Mick Tingelhoff?
Yeah. I don't know anything about... Yeah. But I'm saying if they were to wipe that away and re-decide right now.
Sure.
I don't know anything about the dude off the field, if he was a good dude or a terrible dude or whatever. I know Fran Tarkenton loved him dearly. I think even in 2015 when he was inducted into the Hall, Mick, his mind was starting to go a little bit. He was not 100% there. He's getting up there and getting trying in the later stages of life already. And I think Fran Tarkenton was his introducer to the Hall of Fame, or whatever that term is. He like made the speech for him. But yeah, just a great Viking. Crazy that he was undrafted.
I didn't know he was undrafted.
Yeah,
I think I mistakenly said earlier that he was the first draft pick ever for the Vikings.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, I don't know.
I don't know who that was, but
I feel like that's something I knew at one point. But I want to say it was a running back. Anyways, yeah, Mick Tingelhoff. He's on my list.
There you go. All right, should we get to my number 2, and then you've got a pick, and then we'll do honorable mentions?
Yeah.
All right. So my number 2 pick probably had, I'm going to just glance down my list here, one of the shortest careers of players on my list for the Vikings. He played for a handful of other teams. And again, this is a personal pick. This isn't a like statistically hands down one of the best players ever.
Okay.
But played in that prime era of my childhood growing up. You'll guess him right away. 9,316 yards, 6-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, 92 touchdowns. He was a rookie in 1998.
21st overall pick in 98. Dropped in the draft, actually.
He did, mostly for off-the-field stuff.
Yep.
But Denny Green, he saw some promise in this kid from Rand, West Virginia.
Yeah. And to this day, I think you could still get some emotion out of Randy Moss if you bring up Denny Green's name.
Yes.
There's a few famous interviews Randy's done, and one for sure where somebody asked him straight up, like, what credence do you give to Denny Green bringing you here, and how do you feel about that? And Randy breaks down, just like, yeah, that guy gave me a chance when nobody else did.
Yep.
I love that man.
So Randy Moss. We didn't say it officially. Number 2 on my list. Drafted in 98, played for the Vikings until 04. 587 catches, 92 touchdowns, almost 10,000 yards.
Yeah.
One more season, he would have easily had 10,000
Well,
yards.
he had one more month with the Vikings in 2010, which
1 month.
Yeah, that really soured me on him at the time. In 2010, at the end of 2010, I was not a fan of Randy Moss. I didn't like him at all. I've come around now. I think that was just a really rough time for everybody.
And he's not everybody's favorite person.
Yeah.
And he definitely has a checkered past. And his childhood in West Virginia was rough, to say the least. But I think you look at where he's gone professionally, even after football. I mean, we watch him every week on ESPN's Monday Night Countdown, and I mean, he's just kind of the picture of making something of yourself from nothing.
Yeah. Earlier, I said Dante was my first favorite quarterback, and Chris Hovan was in my list of favorite Vikings. Randy Moss was my first favorite player. He's still on that list. He's on my list.
He's on your list?
He is on my list today.
I think he has to be on an all-time Vikings list.
I don't think you can have a respectable all-time list without Randy Moss.
Agreed.
Even with those 3 or 4 weeks in 2010 where stuff was going on. He said some stuff and everybody else said some stuff. But outside of that, I mean, it's a shame that they traded him away. I think it was mostly contract reasons. If I remember right, there was a game where he walked out of towards the locker room with a few seconds left in the game towards the end of that 2004 season. I don't remember. Randy Moss, one of the greatest Vikings of all time. Highlight reel. I'm watching plays in my head right now. The Randy Moss flip to Mo Williams that was famously turned into a Burger King commercial.
The theatrics of Randy Moss would win him an Academy Award.
I'm thinking back. There was a really cool game against the Saints in New Orleans where he had just a toe-tipping catch for a touchdown in the back corner of the end zone. That was crazy. You
can't talk about crazy moments or games without the Thanksgiving game his rookie year.
3-1-63-3. Yeah.
Yep. Crazy.
You can't even do that in Madden. Like
crazy.
Like it's insane. And to think that we have a guy right now that is doing things that haven't been done since Randy Moss in JJ. He's breaking Moss records. Like soon enough, I don't know if the term getting mossed will ever change from being getting mossed. But JJ is going to have his own term. Do the gritty on him. I don't know. That sounded gross. I don't know. But JJ is on that trajectory. He is in line, and you've got both on your list.
I
And
sure
Randy's
do.
on mine. Well-deserved. One of the best Vikings of all time. I mean, you hear all the time. Dustin Baker in his interview with us said Randy Moss solidified me being a Vikings fan. Like, my goodness. That guy was crazy.
He was fun to watch. And he was controversial, and he had off the field stuff, and all of that kind of sits in the backdrop of what was an incredible career,
Straight cash, homie. How are you going to pay for that fine? Just straight cash, homie.
I love that.
I think, didn't he run someone over at one point?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I try not to pay too much attention to those things. We'll just focus on what happens on the field.
But yeah, definitely the greatest Viking that ever played his college ball at Marshall.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there was a lot of controversy there too, because I think he could have gone to Florida State. He probably could have gone anywhere.
I think the
in
big ones
country.
were Florida State and Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, yep.
In whatever order, I don't remember.
Yep, because he could have played for Bobby Bowden or Lou Holtz, and both of them wanted him really badly, but then he was just kind of an idiot, made some bad choices, and
we got some magical years though. Did he ever win a Super Bowl? He was on the undefeated Patriots team, but I don't think he ever won the Super Bowl.
I don't know.
And then he played on the Niners team that went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Ravens.
The Harbaugh Bowl.
Yeah. When the Ravens had
When the
both
lights
Matt
went
Burke and Bryant McKinney.
There you go. And when the lights went out.
And then when the lights went out. So I don't know if Randy ever got a Super Bowl, which is tragic. He's one of the best of all time, and to never get
to
the
not
ring.
have a ring. Yep. All right. Well, let's get to some honorable mentions here. Is your final pick really good?
It's one that hasn't been said yet. It's not like a firework worthy pick, but I'll go to bat for it till the cows come
I think
home.
I have a few ideas. Has this player been mentioned?
I don't think he has.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, that makes things interesting, especially as we're now getting
an hour in,
a ways away into this episode.
Well, honorable mentions, maybe we don't have to go too deep into the weeds for these guys, but
nope.
Do we just want to go bang, bang, bang? You, me, you?
Yeah. So I'll start. I know you have 3, which will make you'll have to double up maybe at the end, but that's okay. I want to double back on, because we just finished talking about Randy Moss as my second pick. So my first honorable mention is Corey Stringer.
Okay.
And in my display case here, I actually have a newspaper article from the Star Tribune in Minneapolis. And I believe it was August 2nd, 2001, which would have been the day after he died. He died tragically from symptoms of a heat stroke at training camp in Minnesota in 2001. And there's a picture of Randy Moss actually crying at the memorial service for Corey Stringer. So I had to include him. He played in a time when offensive line statistics weren't great. They weren't nearly as advanced as they are today. So there's not a lot of stats to throw out there for him, but he was a Pro Bowler the season before he passed away in 2000. And I mean, anytime somebody is, putting their life out there and loses their life, I think that deserves mentioning. And again, that was kind of a formidable time in my life. I was 10 years old, I think, or 11 maybe. No, I would have been 10 in August of 2001. So that was a poignant moment in my Vikings fanhood. And when I learned about that through my parents, it was kind of a heavy hitting thing.
Yeah.
So,
and that was right before I really started being a Vikings fan. So I mean, maybe that season was when I started looking at the Vikings as being a diehard fan. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but I think a silver lining around his passing is that it really forced the change of a lot of practices.
Yes.
In the way that teams treated their players, or the technology that was available, or the the opportunities players had to get a break or get a water break.
And it's not even in the NFL, but it's in all sports at all levels. I'm a high school coach, and the Corey Stringer Institute is something that's referenced in all of the professional development and training that I have to do yearly in terms of heat stroke and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and I think they might even like sponsor a lot of that. So
that's good. So
it's had a far-reaching effect for sure.
You'd like to think he would be happy with all of that. Obviously, would much rather have Corey Stringer, and all of those safety measures without somebody passing. But at least there is that silver lining of waking up and having to know exactly what to do to keep people safe.
Yep.
All right.
Who do you got?
One of my honorable mentions. You love him, you hate him. He played for the Chiefs, the Vikings, the Bears, the Panthers, and I think maybe one other team. He only ever played in one Super Bowl. It was when the Panthers lost to, I believe, the Broncos. He had the most beautiful mullet of all time. And he really was a problem off the field when he was in Kansas City until the Chiefs traded Jared Allen to the Vikings for, I think, a couple of first-round picks. As a Viking, I don't know that he ever really had any off-the-field issues. He had some of his own personal issues that I think being traded really woke him up to. He was a great Viking, and I had him on my list, but then in doing research, I found other guys and had to take him off. Just mostly, if I would have had the purple people eaters like all wrapped into one, Jared Allen absolutely would have been on my list. If this list was 11, Jared Allen's on it.
We got to watch him be inducted into the Ring of Honor.
We have,
last year.
or at least I have.
We have the mullet.
The mullet.
Yeah, I've got mine right behind this chair.
Yeah, the fake mullet they handed out to every player or every fan at the stadium. He was so fun, and he had, I think, half a sack away from breaking the sack record. Man, he deserves he's one of those that you feel bad that he never got a Super Bowl. He deserves to have won a Super Bowl at some point, but it just never happened. And this guy even played for the Bears, I think. One of the purple people, I think Carl Eller played for the Bears as well. Might be wrong on that. It's him or Jim Marshall. Either way, Jared Allen should be on the list. He's an honorable mention, and I'm okay with that.
Here you go.
All right, should I double up now?
It's up to you.
Another guy on the defensive line at the same time Jared Allen was playing. He was a part of a wall. He was half, maybe a little more than half of a wall. He actually had a couple interceptions as a Viking, definitely a lot of sacks. He was a guy that everybody in the locker room loves. Played for the Seahawks for a minute, which we'll forgive him for. I think he even played for the Saints for a minute, which we can forgive him for as well. Half the Williams wall, Kevin Williams, 93 himself. I think Big Ticket is his nickname. Famously became a Viking. He was technically the 7th overall pick, but really wasn't picked until after the 8th pick was taken, because the Vikings were late in getting their card in. But yeah, Kevin Williams. He's one of my honorable mentions.
Those Williams brothers were fun to watch.
Yeah.
That defensive line in that era was really fun to watch. Was Brian Robinson on that line too?
I think he was like in the tail end, because it was him. He was kind of that fourth purple people eater kind of guy. Robinson, very good, but it started off with Allen, Williams, and then Ray Edwards.
That's right. Yep.
And then Edwards went off to, I think, Atlanta, and then Brian Robinson started. But yeah, that Williams wall was fun. Pat Williams, a great Viking in his own right, but Kevin Williams, an amazing Viking.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a good pick. All right, my final honorable mention is not a player, actually.
We might have the same guy, Ev.
Oh, boy. He's been with the Vikings since 2002.
We do not have the same guy, Ev.
Okay, we don't have the same guy. That's fine. You'll know who this is right away. We've already referenced him, not directly, but indirectly. At least I quoted him. And I quoted him because he is still currently the voice of the Vikings.
Ooh.
Play-by-play commentator.
Such a good pick.
Paul Allen.
Yeah.
And he's on my list because I've spent way too much time in the car driving back and forth from Minnesota as a kid listening to him call games. And it would not be an all-time list if it weren't for Paul Allen. I wouldn't have the same love and appreciation for Vikings football if it weren't for him. His passion, his excitement, the way that he calls games. I know that he's accused of being a homer quite a bit.
Homer. There's not an accusation. He is a homer.
He is.
I think he wears that badge proudly.
He sure does. But as Vikings fans, we love him for it. I know he's had some controversy for some of the things he said on air. Mild controversy. I don't think he's getting fined or anything. But he is known for being critical of other teams when they come after our guys. He's also known for being critical of our own guys. I haven't listened to any of his calls really this year, but I would have to guess that he's been critical of some of the play in this 23-24 season. But even that aside, just the passion, the excitement, the energy that he brings, I could simply just listen to him and not even watch the games and have just as much enjoyment doing that. So
we are out of staters. We live in Iowa, not Minnesota. But if we did live in Minnesota, or if I ever figure out a way to do it, I would definitely mute the TV and just listen to his broadcast every game. He is a homer. If you're not a Vikings fan, you're not going to love him as much as we do. You can respect him. He is such an entertaining caller of games. I listen to his daily radio show. Not every day. I used to, but I mean, life happens now. He loves this team so much. If anyone who's not a Viking deserves to be named a Viking, it's him. He loves this team so much. He just exudes excitement, and he is the voice of Vikings fans. Yes, he's the voice of the Vikings. He is the voice of Vikings fans. Even if he ever has an opinion that you don't agree with, you got to respect it because he's going to back himself up. Like, if he ever said, like, no, we shouldn't start this guy, and here's why, and maybe you think they do need to start that guy, you're at least going to listen to him and respect what he's saying. He's so fun, so entertaining. He should be, when it's all said and done, he needs to be in the Vikings Ring of Honor.
Absolutely, 100%. And other teams and other sports and other organizations have done that for radio announcers.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely 100% deserving.
Yeah. Yeah, and if he retires at some point and we've gone just an unreasonable amount of time without him being in the Ring of Honor, I will personally sit in front of the stadium for as long as it takes with a sign saying, put PA in the Ring of Honor. It won't take that because they'll do it like the day he says he's going to retire, but he's a Viking, and he's not on my list, but my goodness, that's a great pick. He probably even deserves to not be just an honorable mention. Like, yeah, he's not a player. He's never, I don't know, does he get paid by the team? Sure. I don't know. He's a Viking. He is a Viking in every sense of the word.
I will say my family helped me a little bit with this. My parents, my sister and brother-in-law, and that was one that I hadn't thought of. Corey Stringer was an honorable mention that I was like, yeah, I definitely have to. Like, I mean, the news article and stuff in my display case is like enough. And someone else recommended Paul Allen. I'm like, yes, 100% going on my list. I don't even care if he's not a player. Like, he's going in. He deserves it. So
he has enhanced my fanhood.
100%.
I am more of a fan than I would be without him, just because he is the entertainer he is. Great pick.
Yep. I'm interested to know who your final honorable mention is before we get to our final picks.
Yeah, you'll agree with this.
I'm sure I will.
He is on the list of the 50 greatest Vikings. Most of the names we've said are on that list. Never played for the Vikings in the sense that he never performed football acts on the field. He is the greatest coach in the history of the Minnesota Vikings, the late, great Bud Grant.
Also a great pick and
Yes.
deserves to be on the list.
He is a Viking, and in every sense of the word, because he never played for the team. He's not a Vikings player, but he played in the sense that he coached, and he played the game of football in the strategy sense. One of the greatest Vikings of all time, the unofficial mascot towards the end of his life. It's a tragedy. He never got to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl. If for nobody else but for him, they should have figured out a way to do it. I mean, obviously they try every year to their best ability, but I think he still has an office at at TCO, whatever it's called.
In Egan, yeah. And I think he will. I mean, I think that
they
will
better not
be
touch that room.
a commemorative thing to arguably the greatest man to have ever been a part of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
I would go as far to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so great that they have included him in as much as they have the last decade or two. I think Kevin O'Connell as a person grew a lot and is very much a better coach because of his relationship with Bud Grant before his passing. A great Viking. Should be on the list. He's an honorable mention ultimately for me because he wasn't a player. So I kind of broke the rule a little bit there too. But yeah, I'm gonna fight for his name to be on that list till the cows come home. I'd be shocked if he's not in the Ring of Honor.
He will be soon.
I think he is.
Is he already?
I'd be shocked if he wasn't already.
He might be.
If he had a number, it should be retired.
Well, he played Canadian football, I think.
Did he?
Before he made his way into coaching. I think he coached Canadian football.
Well, he coached for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think he did win a championship with them.
I think he played in Canada before coaching, and then he coached in Canada, and then he made his way to Minnesota.
Yeah, still one of the greatest Vikings of all time.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, we each have one more on our list.
Yours is your number one.
Mine
is
one.
Just on my list, so they might be a little bit different. I'm intrigued to know. I'm trying to think your list back. Who's not listed?
So I'll just recap mine really quick.
Okay.
JJ, number 10.
Mm-hmm.
Hitman, number 9.
Also on mine.
Paul Krause, number 8.
Also on mine.
Tarkenton, number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Purple People Eaters were number 6. Paige Eller Marshall.
Also on mine individually, but yeah.
Robert Smith, number 5.
Not on mine.
Dante Culpepper, number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian Peterson, number 3.
Also on mine.
Randy Moss, number 2.
Also on mine.
That's it.
All
and
right.
My honorable mentions: Corey Stringer, Paul Allen.
Yep.
So I'll give you my number 1. 13,899 yards. 8-time Pro Bowler. 2-time All-Pro. 130 touchdowns. Played from 1990 to 2001. But
I'm surprised by this.
The Vikings weren't his first team.
Or his last. He played for the Dolphins at the end of his career, too.
That's right. Do you know who it is?
I'm surprised. It's not a bad pick. I'm not saying you shouldn't have picked Chris Carter, your number 1 Viking of all time. I am surprised, though. I would have put Randy above Carter.
Well, Chris as a Viking was better than Randy. Played longer.
True. Yep. Okay.
And has, in some ways, double the stats.
Mm-hmm.
He has 1,101 catches, 130 touchdowns, and 13,899 yards. And all of his accolades, Pro Bowls, All-Pro, led the league in catches and receiving touchdowns. He led the league in catches in 94 and then receiving touchdowns in 95, 97, and 99. All of those were with the Vikings. None of those were with the Eagles or the Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Carter is a Viking.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. And I know a little bit of the background. I know that he was kind of a hot mess in Philly. There was some addictions and personal problems going on off the field that affected his play. But similar to who was it that you mentioned? Jared Allen. Before becoming a Viking, when Chris Carter, number 80, made his way to Minnesota, those things seemingly went away, and he became I think, the greatest Viking of all time. And a little bit of that is personal and subjective, because my childhood years, I had a poster of him doing his typical touchdown celebration, down on one knee, finger up in the air. I'm pretty sure we share a similar birthday. At one point, I thought we shared a birthday, but I think we're off by like 2 or 3 days, maybe. But I always thought that was super cool too, to like share a birthday or be close to sharing a birthday with one of your favorite athletes of all time. I actually do have, I think it's a printed autograph, but it's still an autographed picture of number 80 there in my display case. And I think I have a card or two.
Yeah, there's 2 there that I can see.
So yeah, personally, and I also think his play backs it up. I think he is my number 1 Viking of all time.
I mean, it's hard to argue with. You saying Viking specific stats, definitely put him over Randy Moss statistically as Vikings. Yeah, I mean, that's you can't argue with that too much. I mean, you could kind of get nitpicky and say, Fran Tarkenton maybe or whatever, but I mean, yeah, unless JJ eclipses all of those numbers, that's a hard one to fight. Yeah, good pick, Ev.
Thanks. It was fun. I liked putting this list together.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know who you've got as your final.
Well, my final pick, and again, I didn't break these down into best to worst or, almost greatest to greatest.
Sure.
But I think this is another one that maybe it's kind of a safe pick, but you're not going to be able to really argue with it. Well, let's see if you can figure it out.
Have they been mentioned already?
I don't think so. If they have, it was quickly in passing.
Okay.
The
making the scan to make sure that they're
I'm trying
not
to
up in
see,
there.
he was the 19th overall pick. He started 220 games. I don't know if those were consecutive or not, but there had to have been a long streak in there at least. 12-time Pro Bowler.
Wow.
He plays a position that does not accumulate a lot of personal stats. You and he, I don't know about currently, but at some points have shared an occupation. He's a Hall of Famer. He went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2009. Again, he was a 19th overall pick, but that was in 1988. And he played through the 99 season. I believe he was only ever a Viking. His number's not retired.
That rules out, I was going to say Matt Burke.
It is not Matt Burke.
It rules him out.
But you're warmer.
Gosh. Is there
your occupations?
Is there a 4 in his jersey number?
There is a 4 in his jersey number.
Is it 40?
No, it is not 40. Kleinsausser, while a fan favorite, I don't know if he racked up the personal numbers to be a greatest of all time. Although fan favorite,
definitely a memorable
and
Viking.
really good.
Memorable
Viking. I think Kleinsausser was a second-round pick. Like really good.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm struggling.
He played guard, and no, I'm not talking about Steve Hutchinson, who could argue being on this list as well, but he's not.
Sure.
I think just the biggest number is 12-time Pro Bowler. He's the greatest guard in Vikings history. I, of course, am talking about Randall McDaniel.
That is a good pick.
Yep. Who I believe was famously a kindergarten teacher or elementary school teacher for a little while. I don't know if he still is. He is our parents' age. Born in the mid-60s. Yeah, one of the greatest Vikings of all time. It's a good thing at guard if they're not talking about how many sacks you've given up, or if they're not mentioning your name all the time, because that means you're probably doing your job.
And I feel like those stats didn't really come on until the last decade of the NFL, where there's all these PFF grades and stuff like that. Offensive line, there weren't a lot of stats to gauge how well they played. You are correct in saying that if if we weren't talking about you, you were doing a good job. So I definitely agree with you. And I think Randall McDaniel is definitely a wonderful pick. And I think he deserves to be in any top 10.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, again, just because he was the last guy I named doesn't mean he was my number one. I'm not saying he's the greatest Viking of all time.
Sure.
But if you really were to get nitpicky, you could argue he's not a bad choice for being greatest Viking of all time. It's just he's not a flashy, sexy position, you know? It's just, I couldn't not have him on that list. Any Hall of Famer, NFL Hall of Famer, it's hard to not have them on this list unless they're current guys. Or a guy like Adrian Peterson who's not yet in the Hall of Fame. I think that's just a timing thing. He's not eligible yet. But yeah, Randall McDaniel, definitely a top 10 Viking of all time in my eyes.
Those were good picks. I think both of us between our lists had a really good group of Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue order and maybe get nitpicky about, you know, a guy or two that wasn't on the official list, but overall, like, you're not saying, I don't think there's a guy on here or your list that it's like, no way, of course this guy shouldn't be on the list. Like,
right.
I don't know. I think for me, maybe like Dante, I would kind of maybe raise my eyes at, but he's still one of the greatest Vikings of all time. It's hard to argue any of these guys.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a subjective list that we created based on very arbitrary ideas and thoughts. And the only rule was really they had to have spent most of their career as a Viking, which I think we followed that rule.
Oh, yeah.
For the most part. So I can't think of anybody that didn't spend a majority of their career as a Viking.
Yeah.
There were players that have played for other teams, but...
Yeah, I mean, almost all of these guys spent at least a year with another team.
Yep.
Somewhere.
And that's typical in the league as well.
Yeah. Especially modern NFL as well.
Right.
I liked this.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I would definitely we should do something like that again. Maybe a position group or
that would be fun.
Era specific.
Mm-hmm. I even thought, and I brought this to you a few days ago, like the top 10 quote unquote what if players of all time. Like, what if they didn't get injured? Or what if they were nice off the field? You know, like, just what if? Like,
what if Randy had played more games with the Vikings?
Like, I'm a fan of Marvel, and they do the what if TV show, and it's like, oh, what if, you know, this happened a different way? So we could say, like, oh, what if, you know, Brett Favre was drafted by the Vikings? You know, stuff like that.
Right.
But or more likely to our list, like, what if Dante didn't blow his knee out? Or
Sam Bradford.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Sam Bradford. That hurts my soul to think about how good that could have been.
We're going to have to run to the store, get some more beer, and we'll hit record again, and we'll just be here all night.
Pay no attention to the style of our clothes or the anger level of our wives as we record for days and days and days.
No, this was really fun, though, and definitely something that we will have to do again.
Absolutely. Let us know if you liked this episode. Should we do more of these?
Yeah, please.
And who you would have on your top 10 list.
Yeah, comment away. I mean, let us know. And be nice, but if you disagree, let us know. I'm not tied to my list. I could be convinced.
I spent an hour on my list.
Yeah.
So
about the same.
What'd you think of the Make Waves Amber Ale?
I really like this beer. I may have found my new favorite amber.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And not a terrible price. I found it at our local Hy-Vee, an Iowa brewed beer from No Coast in Oskaloosa. Mm-hmm. The can looks cool. It's a big Kraken. It just looks cool.
Isn't there like a little tagline on the bottom of the can? Kraken to a cold one?
Yeah. Kraken. Kraken to a cold one.
That's fun.
5.2%. It's definitely crushable. We need to make a shirt that says, like, it's a crushable one or something like that.
Well done, No Coast.
Yeah, thank you, No Coast.
We like it.
We like it a lot. And after trying the Van Gogh and now this Make Waves, I have to try more No Coast beers now.
Yeah, they're good. Good stuff. Well, this has been fun. And like we said, hopefully we'll be doing some more of this in the future.
Yeah.
If you're out there listening, make sure you like and subscribe or follow or whatever you do on the particular platform that you're engaging with us on. We would appreciate the support.
Yeah, and leave a rating too. We're still pretty young. We've got a few people that are starting to notice who we are, but we haven't found you guys yet. You haven't found us. We haven't found you. We need our audience. We're getting there. We think we do a good job. We got a really cool, chill vibe. And if that's your thing, I feel like that's a lot of people's thing. It's not everybody's thing, but it's a lot of people's thing. So even if you're not a Vikings fan, hopefully we're entertaining. Yeah, and we're everywhere. I mean, all of the socials, even down to Reddit a little bit. You can listen to us. You can watch us. Yeah. You can interact with us. We're pretty easy to get a hold of. So,
Yep. Hit us up wherever you are, and we'll respond.
Yeah,
for sure. But
well, my glass is empty.
Mine's almost empty. So.
But I think this is the time.
It is.
Until next time.
Skol. Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.